Hello, this is meteorologist Brad Warner from Region Weather Live, your YouTube source for weather across the Dakotas and Minnesota, with just a little bit of an outlook for your weekend and just kind of taking a look at what's in store for the beginning of next week. So as I stated earlier in the week, we're watching this high pressure system at the upper levels just kind of straggled back to the west, and these stronger winds that are kind of helping aid some of these storms down in South Dakota the last couple of days. Ultimately, these winds will also push off to the west, where really there's not going to be a whole lot of wind at the mid and upper levels as we get into the weekend, and that big dome of high pressure sits right over us. So it's going to be hot and humid for most of the region throughout the weekend. And so when you take a look at this, everything here in this kind of bluish color is dew points in the 60s. Once you get to the darker blue, they're actually mid 60s. And the purples, if you see those, are dew points right in the low 70s. And so, of course, today, Friday, those dew points quite high out in the east and actually fairly uncomfortable out in the west as well. And as we get into Saturday, not a whole lot changes. As we go into the afternoon, you can see those higher dew points remain out in the east, but still not all that comfortable out in the west either, with the dew points still in the mid 50s at least. Sunday, more of the same. Perhaps those dew points push just a little bit further to the west, and things begin to warm up again during the day on Sunday. In fact, taking a look at our expected high temperatures for today on Friday, look at that. Everybody in the mid to upper 80s to low 90s across a good portion of kind of the central to eastern part of the Dakotas and across much of Minnesota. A few cooler spots, of course, just along the North Shore. They get a little bit of help from that breeze coming off, and then some of that higher elevations up in the Badlands and of course, in the Black Hills region. Saturday, more of the same, generally in the upper 80s to low 90s, a little cooler in the North Shore. Begins to warm up just a little bit more out in the Badlands area. And on Sunday, again, that 80s creep just a little bit further down to the south and west, but generally we're looking at the upper 80s to low 90s, and even some of you guys up in the North Shore are going to be in the upper 70s to low 80s for high temperatures on Sunday. And of course, with the higher temperatures and the higher dew points, that means the higher CAPE values. And you've heard me talk about this plenty of times. It's just how much available energy there is in the atmosphere. So generally speaking, anything above 1,000 means you're probably going to get at least a chance of thunderstorms. As you get closer to 1,500 to 2,000, you've got at least the possibility of some severe storms. And, you know, once you get into that 2,500 or above, especially if you have the upper level support, then you're looking at some really good monstrous thunderstorms, but we're lacking that upper level support. Saturday, those CAPE values remain about the same, but generally pretty high across most of the region. And Sunday, those CAPE values, again, generally above 1,000, somewhere in that 1,000 to 2,500 range. It just depends on where you're at. Maybe not quite as good out here on the northeastern part of Minnesota once we get into Sunday. All right, so what does that mean? That pretty much means every day we have a chance of at least some thunderstorms. Here we are for Friday, and look at that. It's just a hodgepodge. It's the popcorn. We are the popcorn popper of the United States right now, where you just don't know which of these kernels is going to pop or where they're going to be exactly. And once they do pop, just because of the upper levels are so light, it's hard to really determine what direction some of these cells are ultimately going to go. You're dealing with outflow boundaries and just different things in the atmosphere that make things move all kinds of crazy directions. Now it looks like, and I think if I had to pick some areas that had a better chance for seeing some storms than others, it's probably where they're kind of depicting in through here on this particular model across central portions of North Dakota, northwest Minnesota. Perhaps something more of an arc in through here across South Dakota. Again, nothing widespread, just some scattered activity. And then within some of these storms, you might get an isolated pocket here and there that might come severe for a little bit. But again, it's just really going to be difficult to say which cell exactly when and all that kind of good stuff. Now, of course, as we get kind of to that 9 p.m. and beyond, most of those storms are going to dissipate. And then we start all over again for Saturday, and really because that high pressure system moves even a little more over our area, I think these storms are going to be even more widely scattered to isolated, and it's going to be very difficult to say where exactly some of these storms are going to occur. Now, because these storms do have a lot of heat and a lot of humidity associated with them, there is that possibility that these storms are going to have a lot of just heavy rains associated with them, and also maybe some small hail. Now, because the upper level winds really don't have much steering to them, some of these storms could kind of linger around in some areas a little bit longer. So some areas could actually get a fair amount of rain, and you're going to be looking, 5 miles down the road, and that person, the farmer next to you, isn't going to see anything. So it's really going to be just one of those really, really sporadic type of events. And then, of course, as we get into Saturday evening and Saturday night, those storms will probably dissipate like they have the last few days. And then as we get into Sunday and Sunday afternoon, again, that popcorn machine is in full effect. We're just going to see some widely scattered activity. Now, the only difference here is you're going to notice we have this cold front that's going to be sweeping down from the north. And so we shift to a little different model here, but we do have a little cold front that wants to just kind of skirt along the north and eastern part of our region going into late Sunday and into Monday. Now, you can see, especially with this model as we go through the day, those storms kind of make it into the north maybe a little bit, and then just fizzle on out. I mean, this frontal boundary really won't do a whole lot as we get into Monday. And switching over to the upper levels again, you can see we've got kind of this jet stream, this batch of colder air here a little bit that eventually pushes this high off to the west, and then drops the humidity across eastern portions of Minnesota as we go through the week, as this kind of pushes back to the west. So continuing on through the week, you can see that basically happening as that high just kind of gets nudged just a little bit to the west as this little low pressure system kind of dumbbells around. And here you can kind of start to see on Monday already what I mean when it kind of pushes those dew points out a little bit, actually pushes it further west to where these areas out in the eastern portions of Minnesota, those dew points aren't quite so high, so a little more comfortable going into next week. But as you get a little bit further to the west where that high pressure still dominates, you're still looking at the dew points in the 50s and 60s. So I think as you get into Monday and we have just a little bit of a cold pool out in the east, we might see a few storms into northwestern parts of Minnesota, northeast, North Dakota. That's probably the best chance for Monday, and that kind of continues as you go into Tuesday as well. Again, with those low dew points, not really expecting much for storms out in the east. It's going to be kind of that boundary between those lower dew points out here and the higher humidity further out to the west. So kind of in between here, kind of in the eastern Dakotas, western Minnesota. I think as we get into next week, it's probably our best chance for seeing some storms again. Now, some of those might have the possibility of being severe, but we'll have to take a closer look as we get a little bit more into next week. Now, there is the possibility beyond next week. We'll see. We're talking way out there to where we might get a little more of a southwesterly flow. Now, we're talking out there a little ways. I'm not sold on this just yet, but just trying to maybe sell a little more hope that there is some extra precipitation on the way. We'll see what happens as we get later into next week to see if these models do continue to show this. But we'll cross our fingers, like I said before in the previous video, that this does indeed happen. So hot, humid, popcorn type thunderstorms. Some of them might be strong with some hail, some smaller hail, and some downpours associated with them. But man, they're just going to be so widely scattered that I mean, if you're one of the lucky few to get some of these storms, good for you. Otherwise, I mean, boy, there's just not much on the horizon just yet. We'll watch and we'll keep our fingers crossed and do a little prayer that maybe that changes down the road. All right, everybody, don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button, and don't forget to share this channel out there with your friends and your family so that they can stay aware and on top of the weather for your region. So for Region Weather Live, I'm meteorologist Brad Warner. Everybody have a good weekend.